What's up, Brew Crew? Opie here. Welcome back to the Brew City Gardener channel. Hey, I just want to start off by saying Happy New Year to everybody. We're starting a fresh new decade, and I hope the first year of it is full of growth and success for everybody. Now that we got that out of the way, I want to get to 5 gardening tips in 5 minutes. And a big thanks and a shout out to Josh over here at the Citystead who tagged me in the 5 gardening tips in 5 minutes series. So I'm happy to give my input. So with that, let's get started. Tip number 1. So my first tip definitely goes out to those beginning gardeners, and it might be the most important, and that is start small. All right, don't overdo it, especially as a more inexperienced gardener. I know you really get excited, and I do too. I get excited every year to get my garden or gardens planted, and I want to try and cram as much stuff in as I can and expand as much as I can. But you know, once these things get going, you quickly start to realize that, man, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work. You got to keep up on all this stuff. You got to make sure it's watered. You got to make sure it's weeded. You got to check for nutrient deficiencies, infestations. I mean, all these things, they start coming at you. And then we get into harvest season, and then you got to get all this stuff harvested. You got to figure out what to do with it. You got to get it canned. You got to get it frozen. You got to give it away, whatever you're going to do with it. Next thing you know, you've got so much stuff. It's just completely overwhelmed. So make sure you have a plan for what you want to do with all these things, and make sure you're going to be able to keep up with all of them, because it can really get overwhelming. Even a small to medium garden for the average person or a less experienced person can be almost too much. So don't overdo it. Then once you get more established and more confident and you know what you're going to do with all the produce, go ahead and start expanding slowly from there. Tip number 2. So tip number 2 is fairly straightforward. It's grow what you eat. I can't count how many times I've tried and experimented with new things, and I love to do that, and I love to know how to grow certain different things, but I don't grow a ton of it until I know that either myself or my friends and family and people around me are actually going to eat it. There's been several instances where I've planted a plethora of, let's say, eggplant, and nobody in my family likes eggplant, and most of it went to waste. And for some reason, we couldn't even give it away. So apparently we're not the only ones that don't care for eggplant. But that's just an example. There's all kinds of different things. Maybe you don't like Brussels sprouts. Well, it makes sense to not grow Brussels sprouts. Don't waste the space in your garden. Only grow the things that you know that you're going to use. Tip number 3. My third tip is experiment. Don't be afraid to try new techniques. If you've been following my channel, obviously you know that I am huge into the straw bale gardening. And it works out great for me, and it's really good for people who say have rental properties or can't really disturb the property that they have their garden on. But there's so many other different techniques. I mean, you've got indoor gardening, you've got hydroponics, container gardening, back to Eden style. There's all different types. So don't be afraid to go out there and experiment and see what works best for you. And you just might find a technique like I have that is just perfect, and you stick with it forever. But you know, if one technique doesn't seem to be working out so well, don't be afraid to try something new. Tip number 4. Now my 4th tip is actually really important, and I think everybody's guilty of this at some point or another, and that's over loving your plants, giving them a little bit too much attention. So you got to kind of step back once in a while and just let nature do its thing. We always have a tendency to overwater or overfeed or overuse pesticides and other things to try to care for our garden, and we ended up caring for our plants so much that we kill them. So sometimes you just step back, let nature do its thing. And as the years go by, you start to understand the symbiotic relationships between all these things. Just let them do their thing. And if you do that, your gardening experience is going to be much more laid back, it's going to be more relaxed, and chances are it's going to be much more successful. All right, so before we wrap this up, guys, I need to tag a couple of people in the 5 gardening tips in 5 minutes series. So the first person I want to tag, or the first couple, is going to be Henry and Irene down at Brainstorm Acres. They are out in the north Arizona desert, the high desert basically. So I'm sure they've got some odds and ends that probably apply to their particular location. But otherwise, they seem to be very experienced gardeners. So if anybody's got some great tips, it's going to be those guys. Make sure you go check them out. And another great gardener that just blows me away every time I watch her videos, it's just incredible. Prairie Plant Girl. She has really got some great insight, and she's really gained quite the following because she's just really good at what she does, and her presentation is excellent. So Prairie Plant Girl, if you've got 5 gardening tips in 5 minutes, I'd sure love to hear them. And last but not least, you. I want to hear your gardening tips. Leave in the comments below. Let us know some of the best tips that you have. Even experienced and novices alike are always learning new things every year. So I always love to see and hear new tips and tricks for the garden. Tip number 5. And my last tip in the 5 tips in 5 minutes is don't be afraid to fail. Even the greatest gardeners in the world fail. I mean, we all have a certain percentage of our gardens that just don't make it for whatever reason or not. So especially if you're a new gardener, don't let it get you down. Every season's going to be a little bit different, and you're always going to fail in one area or another. It just happens. That's the way it goes. Yes, it's disappointing, but there's always next year. That's the great thing about gardening. If it doesn't work out this time, it's probably going to next time. And if you keep having successive failures from year to year, well, now it's time to reach out to your peers, see what you might be doing wrong and where you can improve from there. So absolutely, don't be afraid to fail. Most of us learn from failure, and if you pick yourself up and try again, chances are it's going to work out eventually. So don't be afraid to fail, guys. It's going to happen. All right, guys. Hey, thanks again for stopping by here today at the Brew City Garden. As always, I love having you guys here, and I look forward to hearing from those channels that I tagged, and also from you guys in the comments below. Hey, if you're new here, hey, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you like these tips, give them a thumbs up. All right, guys. Until next time, I want you guys to have an awesome, wonderful week to the new year, and until next time, we'll see you.